open by saying what a pleasure it is to speak in front of you for the first time today. Now, at first glance, this debate seems very specific to my constituency of Halesowen and Rowley Regis. However, there are potentially wider implications regarding the role of English heritage, which should become clear and may well require further investigation. Now, Mr. Rossendale, people in Halesowen are very proud of their cultural heritage, and they are very concerned about one particular site of historic interest, which I want to talk about in some detail as it illustrates some of the wider points I want to make in this debate. Now, Halesowen Abbey has been an intrinsic part of the heritage of Halesowen since it was founded nearly 800 years ago in 1215. It was used as a monastery until the 16th century, when it was closed down by Henry VIII. The site was later granted to Sir John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland, before being sold to the Littleton family in 1958. It was later descended to Lord Cobham, who sold it to the current owner in 1993. A number of impressive tiles from the Abbey are now held in the British Museum. And also, just referring to the County Express from Saturday, August the 3rd, 1938, which reported on a major archaeological find on the site. And many local people and the Halesowen Abbey Trust, which has been very influential in looking after the site, are convinced that there are other major archaeological deposits on this site of major historical significance. Now, the Abbey is, under law, a scheduled ancient monument of national importance, which comes, Mr. Chairman, with certain implications, which I will touch on later. The Abbey was first classified with such significance in the early 20th century. Since 1950, it has also been a Grade 1 listed building due to its special architectural and historic interest. The Abbey is therefore evidently not just another old building, but rather a demonstrably iconic place in the Halesowen historical jigsaw. Now, Mr. Chairman, there has been concern expressed about decisions made about this site over a long period of time. Since 1993, many local people and groups have expressed concern that changes at the site have run roughshod over planning law, local opinion in Halesowen, and even chosen to ignore and contradict the stipulations laid down by the Secretary of State in 1995 when giving scheduled monument consent. At that particular time, rather than knocking down an outbuilding, as was approved by the Secretary of State, an extension was built onto an existing building. Now, I don't have any personal animus toward the current owner of the site, but there have been several retrospective planning permissions applied for on multiple occasions, which the local group, the Halesowen Abbey Trust, argue has caused lasting damage to this site of national significance, for example, by engaging in repeated unauthorised tipping on the site. Now, as a consequence of all this, there has been a substantial drop in the number of visitors to the site, from around 1,800 visitors in one weekend alone in 1989 to the temporary ending of public access in 2001. Furthermore, in spite of its poor upkeep, when the site was open for a 3-day period earlier this year, more than 500 people visited the site, illustrating the importance of this site to local people and people from the surrounding area. Now, English Heritage themselves have on a number of occasions observed the poor condition of the site, and in a report, and I quote, said that they observed broken glass, barbed wire, bricks, pieces of steel piping, fallen roof tiles and beer barrels as amongst the reasons for the failure to open the site and as a general comment on its deterioration. English Heritage, Mr. Chairman, has also accepted that the unauthorised works which went on may have damaged buried archaeological artefacts on the site. As I said earlier, I don't hold any personal animus toward the current owner, and as you will know, Mr. Chairman, it's up to the Development Control Committee of the local authority to determine whether or not the current owner has the best intentions of Halesowen at heart when they consider his planning application. And it will be for them to decide whether the conversion of a number of abbey outbuildings and barns into residential properties offers any kind of improvement to the site itself. Now, I understand that actually last night, the most recent application for the barn conversion has been accepted and passed by the Development Control Committee. Now, as a result of this, Mr. Chairman, it is absolutely imperative that English Heritage play a proactive role in the future of this site. And I think it's essential that they answer some important questions about their role in the future preservation and development of this important historical site. What monitoring and level of active interest are English Heritage now going to exercise as a consequence of the decision? Will they oversee necessary archaeological work? Will they conduct impromptu site visits to ensure that access is properly available? Will we be able to see a report as to what was found during development? And what level of public visiting do English Heritage envisage now for the future of this site? Now, I have to say, Mr. Chairman, that there are significant question marks over the role of English Heritage in this whole saga. As I have said, their role is supposedly to regularly monitor scheduled monuments such as Halesowen Abbey and to ensure that they are conserved or enhanced if conservation work is undertaken. I would, however, question the ability of English Heritage to properly and regularly monitor the sites put into its care and their efforts to act upon any unauthorised material changes to historical sites like the Halesowen Abbey. I should at this point make you aware that Stonehenge has the same statutory protection as Halesowen Abbey, and therefore believe that the role of English Heritage, which I will expand upon in relation to Halesowen Abbey, has potential implications for the heritage and preservations of ancient sites across the UK. Now, English Heritage have had, Mr. Chairman, unrivalled access to Halesowen Abbey through their statutory rights under law. Yet, in spite of this, it took a third party, the Halesowen Abbey Trust, to notice and report unauthorised works being undertaken by the current owner. Indeed, the Halesowen Abbey Trust noted that these works were of, and I quote, sufficient magnitude for them to be clearly visible from a considerable distance outside of the scheduled area with the naked eye. The Halesowen Abbey Trust had also helpfully informed me that English Heritage offices are based in Colmore Row in Birmingham, which, as you may know, Mr. Chairman, is just 20 minutes bus journey away from the site in Halesowen. Now, these material facts call into question, in its current guise, the ability of English Heritage to effectively operate and protect our national heritage and illustrate, in this specific case, an apparent lack of commitment and will to protect this particular site. Now, when this first instance of unauthorised work occurred in 1996 to the site, both English Heritage and the local authority chose not to use legal and practical means at their disposal to seek any meaningful move to restoring the site to its state prior to the unauthorised works. And the local authority made a decision. There was a particular context around that decision to attempt to take the site forward in cooperation with the new owners. And there was a number of assurances that were made in good faith at that time that a repetition of these unauthorised works would not occur. Therefore, there was a little, you may understand that there was some surprise by the Halesowen Abbey Trust in 2005 when English Heritage took the same position in regard to further unauthorised work. Now, English Heritage, as far back as 1996, wrote to the press locally explaining why they had been unable to uphold their statutory functions, commenting at that time that they lacked the necessary resources to do so. Now, Mr. Chairman, if English Heritage say currently that they do not have the resources sufficient to protect our heritage from an unauthorised work, nor the will to take appropriate action against those undertaking the unauthorised works, I think there are some serious questions about the role and validity of English Heritage in this particular case. I know, Mr. Chairman, it did survive the recent review of quangos by my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for the Cabinet Office. However, there is an argument it may in some respects have achieved that slightly fortuitously. Now, English Heritage also made a number of decisions, and I just wanted to give one illustration of the decisions, which could be construed at best very surprising and at worst bizarre, lacking any credibility in regard to the Halesowen Abbey site. For instance, the current owner built an unauthorised 2.3 metre high wall on the site, citing its need as a flood barrier. When the retrospective planning application was put in front of English Heritage and the Environment Agency in October 2002, it was noted that the constructed wall would, quote, not provide any flood defence to the buildings, and both advised the planning application to be refused. Yet just months later, in August 2003, both organisations decided to approve a retrospective planning application on the basis that the wall would be reduced to 1.5 metres high from 2.3 metres. This change in height would not, of course, make any material difference to the flooding issue which had been originally cited. However, the creation of this wall leaves the monument and its setting damaged in perpetuity. Mr. Chairman, the Halesowen Abbey is not the only heritage site which is being poorly maintained in my constituency. The Ice House, which was built in the late 18th century, was given status as a Grade 2 listed building last year. However, the Ice House, which is located in close proximity to the Halesowen Abbey, has been vandalised on a number of occasions, and little has been done to protect and maintain the building. Now, Halesowen is an area which has a long history of heritage, but there are few sites, and people are very concerned and angry about the deterioration of a number of these sites, and they want to see action taken in this regard. And as I say, residents in Halesowen and the surrounding area are rightly concerned by these developments. Constituents have written to me, and others have spoken to me directly to express unhappiness at this current situation. I'm very grateful for the Minister being here today to address some of the points that I have been making. And I just wanted to address some specific questions to the Minister with regard to this situation. What is the Minister's view about the ability and competence of English Heritage to uphold laws and regulations relating to ancient and historical monuments and their surrounding sites, like Halesowen Abbey? Does he believe that a significant change to a historic site, such as the conversion of nearby outbuildings to residential use, would represent a material deterioration, conservation or enhancement to the site in question? Would the Minister support a decision by English Heritage not to take action against the owner of a historic site for breaking the law on the basis that they wanted to avoid upsetting the owners? And will the Minister consider introducing an independent review into the current legislation and role of regulatory bodies surrounding heritage sites of national significance? I'd just like to conclude by saying that the people of Halesowen want to see proper preservation and enhancement of their sites of historical interest, and they are very concerned seeing the ongoing deterioration and apparent lack of will on the part of public agencies to preserve them. And I look forward to hearing from my right honourable friend, and would like to thank him once again for being here to engage in this important debate. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Rossendale, and can I echo my honourable friend's comments by saying I think it's my first opportunity to speak with you in the chair on one of these occasions, and I'm sure it's going to be a pleasure. I saw you running the previous debate with military efficiency, so I'm sure we'll make good progress on this one too. And can I also congratulate my honourable friend from Halesowen for gaining this debate and setting out his case so clearly. I think that he has made it very, very clear to everybody here that Halesowen has elected itself a doughty champion for local people, someone who's willing to fight for local issues and is willing to take it right the way to debates in the Houses of Parliament where necessary, and particularly on something such as heritage, which is not everybody's cup of tea, and he's shown that he's willing to engage right the way across the breadth of political discourse, if you like. So my congratulations to him, and I will endeavour to respond to the points he's made. I'll try and take them in order if I can, since he asked some quite specific questions, and I will go through them one by one. Before I begin that detailed response, Mr. Rossendale, I should just say that if, in the course of my answers and responses, my honourable friend finds some things which, upon further reflection and upon discussion with local constituents, he wants to come back to me on, I am, of course, at his disposal, and he can either write to me or we can have a conversation if there are any remaining points to follow up on after this debate is finished. Now, perhaps it would be helpful if I gave a small amount of background about the site, because I think my honourable friend has quite rightly pointed out that it's quite a complicated site, and it has, on frequent occasions, I think, been quite messy, and there's all sorts of different layers of usage which have built up during the course of the site's long history. And I think most recently it's been quite a hard-working agricultural area as well, so it's been used as a farmyard and a working area for quite some time. So I think he's absolutely right to point out that the site has been messy. However, of course, he will understand that from English heritage point of view and from the government's point of view, while obviously everyone would like all parts of the country to be beautiful and gorgeous and well maintained, the important point here is whether or not the heritage has been damaged for future generations and whether or not there is access, albeit messy access, available to the public as well. And those, I think, are the points which he's driving at, and I think that is the crucial stuff. So I shall try and make sure I confine my remarks to the thrust of his questions if I can. He made some quite specific questions, or asked some quite specific questions, about controls which may or may not be exercised by English Heritage on the development process, because as he pointed out, the local authority, in its planning authority role, gave permission just yesterday for the proposed developments to go ahead. He's absolutely right to say that, therefore, for a monument of this importance and seniority, English Heritage will expect to maintain some quite close scrutiny of the development process to make sure that the monument itself isn't harmed and that the development goes as planned and does not depart from the original plans and so on. Because the requirements of each individual site where these kinds of things take place are so specific to the site, what I'm going to ask English Heritage to do is to write my honourable friend a letter detailing precisely how they plan to engage with the development process in this particular case, because I think if I describe generalities, that may not necessarily do the trick for this specific site, which will have its own individual idiosyncrasies. But if I ask English Heritage to write to the honourable gentleman to lay out precisely how they plan to engage with this, then he will have something in black and white from them, which he will then be able to check is being done, and equally local constituents and indeed the trust themselves will also be able to know what they're going to expect from English Heritage to make sure that that the development process is being done both sympathetically and in a controlled fashion. And I'm sure he and his constituents and I would all agree that that is essential over the coming weeks and months as the development process moves forward. He also asked, do I believe that, or does the government believe that a significant change to a historic site, such as a conversion of nearby outbuildings to residential use, would represent a material deterioration of conservation or enhancement to the site in question? And I think this is a tremendously important question, both generally and in the specific case of this site, Mr. Rossendale, because it is undoubtedly true that any change and any development can constitute a risk to a site of heritage importance. There's absolutely no doubt about that. However, it's also true to say that sympathetic development done right can be the saving of an awful lot of these kinds of sites. And in general, not just English Heritage, but all sorts of other heritage bodies up and down the country, and indeed the Department of Culture, Media and Sport have found, is that it is far, far better to have a sympathetic owner or manager of a site, and a site which is in continuous use and has a sustainable use going forward, just simply because at that point it has a continuing purpose, and therefore it is likely to be invested in as necessary to make sure that both the new structures and the historic structures are maintained in a good position. I happily give way to my honourable friend.
Very great words, right on for giving way. I totally understand the point he's making, that in this particular case, there has been a lot of evidence over a long period of time as to a lack of confidence, if you like, within the local community, and particularly the Halesowen Abbey Trust, as to the will, if you like, or the will to actually make the necessary changes and to ensure that where there is controlled development, that it is done in a way which is suitable for the site and preserves its potential archaeological interest.
Well, Mr. Rossendale, I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. I think I would say to him that, as I understand it, the plans which have just been approved were originally developed, I think, a couple of years ago, starting in 2008, in full consultation with English Heritage. So they have had extensive input to those plans and have, I think, indicated that they are comfortable with the way that the plans will treat the monument and the listed remains. The question, of course, is not just whether or not the plans are sympathetically drawn and intend using sensible materials and will therefore frame the heritage parts of the site in an impressive and academically acceptable way, but also whether or not those plans will genuinely be delivered as the development process goes through. I take his point about that. I'm going to come on to answer some of his questions about the developments that have gone on the site in the past without planning permission, have had to have retrospective planning permission. But I hope that my previous answer to his question about controls over the development process and how English Heritage is planning to engage with those, and the fact that I'm going to ask English Heritage to write with him with a list of how they're going to do that, will help to address both his and local people's concerns. And obviously, if in the, I hope, very unlikely event that English Heritage don't live up to what they're planning to do on that specific site during the development process, then I'm sure that he and the Trust will both be on to English Heritage's case and contacting me as necessary during the development process to make sure that there is no slippage or backsliding. So just to pick up on the final point I was making in my answer to the last question, Mr. Rossendale, it is important to realise that it is better to have a living building, one which is being used in a sustainable fashion, providing it is being done in a way which is sympathetic to the heritage asset concerned. It is far better to have that than something which is unused, uncared for, does not attract investment, and therefore is unlikely to be maintained. And that is something which we find across the country. In fact, last week I was lucky enough to visit some of the new developments taking place up by King's Cross Station in northern London, where there are a number of listed buildings which are being incorporated into some stunning modern architecture. And there's a wonderful juxtaposition of old and new. It's being done very, very carefully with a great deal of respect for the heritage assets there. But in all certainty, the future of those heritage assets will be hugely improved as a result of being brought back into use in a modern way. So I hope that's a clear answer to his original question. He also asked, would I support a decision by English Heritage, or would the government support a decision by English Heritage not to prosecute the owner of a historic site for breaking the law on the basis that they wanted to avoid upsetting the owners? Now, Mr. Rossendale, in this particular case, I think he's mentioning in particular the case of the flood wall, or I understand there have been one or two other smaller cases, but that's the one he mentioned in his speech. In this particular case, I understand that English Heritage actually did consider prosecution, took the case to the Crown Prosecution Service, and the CPS indicated to English Heritage that they would not be prepared to take forward the prosecution of Mr. Tudor for the unauthorised works. Now, that isn't to say that it is never right to prosecute, and in fact English Heritage has prosecuted in the past, not very frequently because the cost is very, very high, and I understand that technically achieving a positive result in a court in these particular kinds of cases is quite hard, but it has happened and has been done successfully. So I don't think there's any theoretical obstacle or indeed practical obstacle to doing it, but it does happen very rarely, and given the fact that in this case the Crown Prosecution Service said that they were reluctant to take it forward because they felt it had a low probability of success, I think in this case English Heritage's approach of saying, well, we need to work constructively with the owner was probably their best opportunity in a specific option. That does not mean, of course, that they shouldn't come down very, very hard on examples of bad behaviour, and on occasions it is necessary, as the French said of the English Navy, to hang an admiral pour encourager les autres. So it is important to make sure that one makes it clear that there is a line in the sand beyond which people should not go. And I think the principle is very clear, and as he describes. I think his final question was whether or not we should be introducing an independent review in order to check on the ability of English heritage to uphold laws and regulations. And I would just say to him this: I think that English heritage is held across the wider heritage community, if I can put it that way, in pretty high regard, although obviously no organisation is in any way perfect, and I think that there will be an awful lot of people, including within English heritage, who would say they want it to improve in a number of ways. But that English heritage, amongst others, also agrees that in the wake of the comprehensive spending review, they, like any other part of the public sector, have to do more with less. And in fact, at the moment, they are busy reorganising their organisation in order to become more efficient and to cut their cloth to fit, as in the same way as everybody else has to. It's not pleasant, it's not fun, but they're having to make do, and they are doing so very professionally. But what I would say to him is this: once the dust has settled, I think it's very, very clear that English heritage are going to have to look at some of the processes that they currently undertake, for example in the listings process, to work out how they can perform those statutory tasks in a way which is more efficient, is perhaps faster, quicker, cheaper and less costly, while at the same time making sure that they deliver the important protection of heritage assets, which he and I have both been debating. I'm delighted to give way again.
Just on that point, and again, I understand the point the Right Honourable Gentleman's making. Could he possibly emphasise to English heritage the importance of sites in areas like Halesowen? Because if you say Halesowen heritage, outside of Halesowen, people don't realise the rich tapestry of cultural heritage there is in Halesowen and in other areas of the Black Country, so that they do prioritise and give thought to the importance of these monuments in areas which are not typically thought of as being traditional areas of English heritage.
Mr. Rossendale, I'm happy to do so. And in fact, I think he's touched on a very important point, because heritage assets are wrongly viewed, in my view, as a crumbling piece of awkward obstacle to development. In most communities, they are rightly seen as huge assets which the community can benefit from, and they make each community distinct and different. They keep us in touch with our local past. And also, in many cases, they are great sources of tourism income as well. So yes, I agree with him completely. There are a lot of opportunities there. So to conclude, Mr. Rossendale, I would say that English heritage knows that it has to react to the recent comprehensive spending review by becoming more efficient, in the same way as many other bodies in the public sector. They are in the process of starting that remodelling, and I expect them to go a great deal further over the course of the next several months. I hope that they will do so in a way which will please my honourable friend, and in the meantime I'll ask them to write him with the details of the way they propose to protect this site in the meantime.
Order, order.